Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Rachel Urbach. We're actually in Brighton in her own home. And thank you for having me here. I was wanting to ask you to tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm a carpenter by trade. That's what I do to get money. And I've done that for years. But in the last couple of years, I felt very, very strongly that I needed to do something a bit more meaningful with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always actually been really passionate about communication, about conflict resolution, really, in my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what really brought me to our day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love that doing something with your own hands, like carpentry, which is something that I would love to do that, because you're really getting a piece of wood and transforming it into something. So that's very creative as well, which I think is an element in conflict resolution. You need to be able to think outside the box. I know that it sounds a bit like business big, but it is like that, isn't it?
True, absolutely. Yeah. Kind of getting beyond the blockages really that can be there when you're in conflict, and finding a way through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You see that you've always been interested in conflict resolution. Can you tell us a bit about what you've been doing? Because you mentioned before that you have been self-training here and reading a lot about it.
Well, I think my personal interest came as I've always shared houses. I've always lived with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt like, that you inevitably get the conflicts that arise when you're living with people, And I felt that, that we can always overcome those conflicts if we can talk about them, if we can find the right ways to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that gave me a kind of, just a confidence about the power of communication, really.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I don't know if they're going to be hearing it's the window cleaner,
yes.
But we're just going to carry on nevertheless. To be honest, this situation that you're talking about, sharing a house, is a textbook situation where you are going to have conflicts arising between people, but also you're in a closed environment. You cannot just not talk to people that you're living with, or at least you can do it for some time, but not forever. And issues need to be resolved. They cannot just be let to linger and then at some point pop out and explode in your face, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing that I felt strongly about the value of living closely with people is that you can't hide. That for me, I felt that was a really positive thing, because people tend to hide it away, and I think that can make conflicts get bigger. But actually, when you know people intimately, I think that helps to understand each other and find a way through conflicts.
I suppose it also forces you to understand that you have to reach a compromise. So it's not always going to be your way. It's not always going to be the way of the other person. And I think that's key to RJ conferences, for example, where you have to facilitate an understanding between two parties. Sometimes even you may find that neither party feels guilty, and they both feel victims. Like you could have in a setting like this, or between neighbors and things like that. So I suppose that recognizing that you're going to have to compromise is one of the key skills for RT as well.
Yes, well, it's interesting. That's a whole issue because I'm also a mediator. I'm also a community mediator, so I do also do that kind of neighbourhood conflict stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, that is very, very strong. The idea of neither one is the guilty party. There's something has arisen in the relationship that has broken down, but it's normally there's misunderstandings on both sides and probably inappropriate behaviour on both sides. And through having a conversation where each side gets heard, that begins to restore a sense of humanity. So from a position where people think you're
you're X or Y,
X or Y, they can begin to see each other as human beings again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that I find that a really wonderful process to be part of. RJ is in the setting that I'm involved in, because I'm in the criminal setting. There is much more a sense of there's we call it the harmed and the harmer. So there is a sense that, we're going in to restore a relationship where one person clearly is seen as the guilty party, although I know that restorative practice in a broader sense in schools and stuff doesn't come from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I still think that, they're both very interesting. Mediation is particularly interesting because of what we said. You may have neighbors that, something happened one day and the other person may not even have registered that something actually happened. And then there's the other person holding to it and, nurturing that anger for a long time. And that's because they don't have the skills to simply communicate with each other in a reasonable manner. People are not naturally equipped to deal with that sort of situation. In restorative justice, it is true, so like you said, you tend to have, because of the nature of the offense and the process that follows it, you tend to have a very clear idea of who's the offender and who's the victim. I'm going to use those terms for the moment because I don't know which ones to use. I think harm and harmer are a bit more difficult for me to pronounce.
Yeah.
But I think as well, through talking to other people in the Restorative Perspectives series, you find as well that sometimes the harmer or the offender may be himself or herself a victim, may have been.
Absolutely.
And when I say victim, I don't mean that they have been attacked, which they may have as well, robbed or X. But in a way, it's like they have been discriminated, which is a way of harming someone as well. They may not have been given opportunity.
Absolutely.
And then they themselves feel victims, not of a specific act, but of a situation.
Absolutely. So when we come in, we come in with a very non-judgmental approach, absolutely, and it's very different from what they meet in the rest of the criminal justice system. So absolutely, we come there. I personally am there as much because I want to see the harmer gain something from the experience as I do want to see the victim gain. I think it's a process that both can really gain from. And absolutely, most people, I would say, probably. Although I'm not an expert in criminal justice, but I'm sure most people.
You're an interested party.
I'm an interested party, and obviously people end up there because things have gone wrong in their lives. Of course.
Mm-hmm. What's curious as well is that you as a facilitator, but also as a person that has an interest in all this stuff, you can see that. You can see that a person, particularly. I think that this is more seen in the youth setting where you have young people that misbehave, but also because they have their own problems. And what tends to happen is that you need to address those underlying issues before you can get the situation moving. But it happens with adults as well who may have had a tough life for a number of reasons, poor choices as well. I'm not saying that they're not responsible at all for what the situation may be. But the other person doesn't care about that, does it? The victim.
No, that's not their concern. That's right. Yeah.
At least when they come into the room to meet the offender.
No. What's their concern is the effect that this offence had on them. That's and absolutely, it's rightly is their concern. And although is the case that a lot of victims of crime come to RJ because they quite often tend to be the kind of people who do have a concern actually for offenders. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important that we encourage more people into the process who are not coming for that reason, who are coming because they were badly affected by a crime. Mm-hmm. That's really impactful in the process. It's really impactful for offenders to hear the impact that they had on that person. Yeah.
That's very interesting because recently I was interviewing Theo Gabrielidis, who is, you may have seen the video already. And we were talking precisely for a moment about that, the fact that a lot of people who are not obviously in this sort of thing think that restorative justice is for petty crime. Mm-hmm. That otherwise when crime gets more serious, you need to go through the criminal justice system, someone needs to go to jail. And that's it. And they don't need to be given, they shouldn't be given an opportunity to explain themselves or anything like that. whereas he was arguing that actually precisely because of the emotional charge that serious crime has, that's where the most benefit can be delivered through restorative justice, through allowing people to understand why something happened. Why then? There's an organization actually called Why Me?
Yeah.
And it is about
Yeah.
that, isn't it? It's why me? What made me the perfect target for your misbehavior?
Yeah, and absolutely, I feel very passionately about this. That it is incredibly powerful, particularly for people who've been really harmed. For those victims, and sexual crime as well. And although we have to be, I understand it's a really, really delicate area. You need to be sure that the parties are protected from potential further harm. But the opportunity for people who've been really harmed by crime to be able to face that person, is a huge opportunity for them to regain a sense of self-esteem and power again, which the rest of the criminal justice system just doesn't give them. By going through the criminal process, if you're a rape victim, you don't get to
express
power to express how it was for you, really, and to meet the person
and to ask the questions as well. I guess because that's not done in a court setting. In fact, I suppose that's one of the things that restorative justice answers. It gives victims a voice. It gives offenders a voice as well, so that they can explain the circumstances. But the key thing is that it allows the victim to try to understand why they were victims and why it happened to them, and then allows them to understand what's the situation and move on. The other thing that was interesting as well is that you mentioned that you were trained for youth justice, but you haven't been dealing with young people at the moment. You have been dealing with adults.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think that there is a disparity in how you train and what you were trained for, and what you're facing now as an RJ volunteer?
Just that, I mentioned that I was trained by someone who had more experience in the youth settings, and I'm more interested, and I've gone into the adult setting, and there is a little bit of disparity there. That's right. It works slightly differently in the youth setting than how it does in the adult setting. But
what do you think are the key differences?
I can't really answer that, because it's not my expertise. It's just that
it's your experience, I suppose, more than your expertise.
It's not. I can't really answer that question about what are the key differences. I from what I remember in the training, often it's offered to youth offenders, perhaps almost as an alternative to sentence. I can't.
I think in some cases, yes.
That's just not the way it works in the adult setting. In the adult, it's at the moment, it's the criminal justice process goes as it would have done, and this is offered after that is all completed. So it's not really part of that criminal justice system in that sense. It's a
parallel but separate process.
It's an additional opportunity. It's an additional opportunity to engage in a completely different kind of process where you're meeting with the actual person who you harmed. Or if there isn't, quite a lot of crimes, it's hard to find an individual, like shop burglaries, that kind of thing is hard to find. But we would find what we call a surrogate victim, so someone from the business community, or someone who can express how it feels to be on the receiving end of that kind of crime. So the purpose is to repair the harm, and but in the relationship, and that's the very, very special thing about restorative justice, is it's about the human relationship, and that's where real deep lessons can be learned about the impact of our behaviour, and about who we are. That's why I'm very passionate about it. That is the same in the youth setting. It's the same purpose for a young offender to be brought face to face. So there's absolutely similarities, but some of the technical points are slightly different, and the terminology is slightly different, and the way it works is slightly
I suppose that what you have there is what I'm interpreting is that when you're with adults in the criminal justice setting, they've been sentenced and then they get this opportunity to make amends in a way, but they're not getting out of their sentences. They're not getting out of probation or anything like that, which answers a lot of people who think that RJ is like a slap on the wrist and you're letting people off lightly and things like that.
No, it can be, much more difficult for some offenders, for an offender to actually face up in that way than it is to get a sentence when maybe they've been in prison and that might be actually their comfort zone, a lot of the time for repeat offenders. And what the opportunity of restorative justice for those kind of people is that it can knock them into a new way of thinking, that really may break that cycle of repeat offending, as well.
So make them stop and think about their lives as well.
Yeah.
And what they're going to do.
Yeah, and like you said about, they are victims too. It can, by meeting another victim, it can make them engage a bit with that part of themselves, which has also been hurt, And rather than go into, anger and crime or whatever. I'm not an expert, but that's an opportunity for them to get more in touch with themselves and what they want out of life, what they need from life.
I suppose that the situation for young people is different in the sense that, particularly, obviously for underage people, the system or the community wants to give them another chance. So, provided the crime is not that serious, and even when it is, I suppose, you don't want to ruin that person's life, because we all make mistakes, particularly when we're young. We all do foolish things, and I think this is a way of recognizing, look, we all do it, it's fine, just realize that you have done this and you have caused this to this person or this community, and get back into your in society and think about what you've done and get on with your life, but a normal life where you're not offending or you're not destroying other people's lives. So I suppose that the youth setting is different in that sense, that it does take the place of sentencing in a way.
It can be, yeah. Like I say, I'm not an expert, but it can be part of part of their license, can't it? I think it can be part of. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it can be part of the range of things that are offered to a young person to try and get back onto the straight and narrow, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you now about something completely different, and it's your experience of working with other organizations. You're volunteering with victim support?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're in contact with the police as well here?
Yeah.
And you may be in contact with other organizations. How do you see that going? Do you think that there's a smooth relationship? Do you think that's great? Do you think that's a model that could be exported to other parts of the UK?
Personally, I'm having a great experience, really great experience. I think the agencies are learning to work together, and they have to, because the victim support are experienced in connecting with victims of crime, and the police, and perhaps both actually, and then there's other services that within the prisons that are more experienced working with offenders. So it's just crucial that we're all working together. We need to be able to bring those sides together. That's the difficulty with restorative justice, is getting the two sides to agree. You've got people, victims out there who would be interested in the process. You've got offenders interested, but it's getting the two sides of one offence to both be interested at the same time. That can be difficult.
I think that's very interesting, because on the one hand, you have for people that are in prison, for example, you have offender managers who sort of look after their case. And then for victims, you have victim support and case managers who look after victims. But what you get is both things put in the same place, and you can look at both parties rather than trying to defend one against the other. What you're doing is trying to reconcile the needs of both parties and provide or deliver a better outcome, I suppose, for both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's crucial, and I think it's probably helpful actually for those agencies as well to be more in communication, just to learn a little bit more about the bigger picture that they're working with, isn't it? My experience is great with that. Yeah.
So your experience so far is great. What are you expecting of the future?
Okay, so what the tricky thing, I guess, being a volunteer facilitator is that it's incredibly slow to get the cases. That's so. Yes, I mean there was an expectation when I started that I'll be getting cases, and that's been actually very, very slow to materialise. And when you do get a case, whether or not it gets to conference, actually often it won't get there. There are so many hurdles. But personally, as someone who doesn't have any professional experience in this area, I'm really, really enjoying and valuing the training opportunity, learning opportunity that I'm getting. I'm spending a lot of my time, in meetings, getting extra training, which is great, and very slowly working through cases, but I'm getting amazing support as well. Amazing support.
You can mention who from, by the way. The police, I suppose, victim support.
Well, all the people who are working in the partnership that I've come into contact with have been absolutely amazing, and so I'm not going to name names, because I might miss out some really important people, but my experience has been really, really positive. And they're just so supportive of someone like me who is starting at the beginning, really, no question is a silly question. I can come to them for anything, and that's really helpful. So I think it's great. I can't remember where we started with that question.
No, I'm just thinking that this is a very positive note to end this this conversation. I like to finish with something positive, and I think that you're talking about having that impression that you're fully supported and you're having a good experience. I think that's very good, because at the end of the day, you're doing this voluntarily. You're not getting anything, nothing monetary out of it. You're doing it because you get something different out of it as well, personal, well-being and realization. So, Rachel, thank you very much for receiving me here in your home. And, I hope that everything goes so well. Post on the forum if you ever have any good experiences, or if you have any doubts as well, you can ask our members, and I'm sure that someone will answer.
Okay, thank you.